Yes, sir, it is audible, sir.
Yeah, fine. Shall we start the program?
Sure.
So very good morning. Just a brief introduction about me before starting the program. My name is Dr. B. Srivatsan. I'm basically a BHMS doctor. Did my MBA in hospital administration, and also have completed my lead auditor course for ISO 9001. I have been associated with the value-added corporate for last decade, and I have worked with close to 100 hospitals, starting from OP clinic to 5 large medical college hospital. So with this small background, I will go to the main program. So today's topic is about NABH entry accreditation. So far, last 20 days, it's been a power-packed program. So what I have seen is that a lot of luminaries from CCC has made a good presentation on various industry. This is slightly different from what we have seen so far. So to start with, you have to understand a little bit about the background of our country and health scenario in our country. India is the seventh largest country in the world. It's a very vast country with a scattered healthcare facility. So basically, the healthcare delivery consisting of primary healthcare, where you get only the OPD services, and sometimes you may get attached a laboratory or pharmacy, and sometimes your radiology. Then you have a secondary healthcare where there is an inpatient facility where patient get admitted. Then along with that, there may be some facility where you may have facility to even undergo minor procedures and surgeries. Then there is a tertiary care healthcare facility where it deals with all kind of patient care, and it even provides very high-end surgeries like your heart transplant, liver transplant, kidney transplant. So basically, tertiary care is a very high-end facility. So this is the three level of facilities available across India, and tertiary care available only in cities in India. They're available in the rural areas. And another unique thing about our healthcare is that there is no standardized protocol followed across the country, both in government as well as in private sector. So this is one of the key things which we have to remember. The government hospital encompasses around 80% of the total outpatient care in India and 44% of the total inpatient care. So that means government is able to only take care of only 44% of our population in terms of treatment and care, and rest of the things are taken over by the private sector. So around 70% of the treatment are done in the private hospital in the urban areas, whereas 63% of the patients are treated in the rural areas in the private sector. And we have so far heard about a lot of standards. Then this NABH standard was actually this particular board was formed in the year 2004, and the first standard was released in February 2005. The idea of this NABH accreditation board was to provide a standard for the hospital to improve the quality of patient care and basically to focus on the safety of the patient. So this is the two key objectives of NABH. And as in my previous slide, we saw that there is no standardized protocol. So it varies from hospital to hospital, then it varies from region to region, and even within the locality also it varies from one individual setup to another individual setup. So there is a lot of variability among healthcare delivery. So in 2005, when this standard was released in India, so many people thought that it is too early for country because we are yet to cover whole population of our country in terms of providing quality care, and on top of it, how we can enforce hospital to follow a good quality management system when the basic itself is lacking in most of the setup in our country. But if you look at the history of accreditation, this accreditation process has been there in the world for a long, long time. In USA, it's called Joint Commission on Accreditation. So basically, this was established in the year 1951. In Canada, called Canadian Council on Health Service Accreditation, which was established in the year 1958. Australian Council on Healthcare Standard was established in the year 1974. And in 2005, our very NABH standard was released for the benefit of our healthcare facility. And as of now, this accreditation program is available for hospitals, individual centers, imaging centers like your CT, MRI centers, even an OP clinic, standalone OP clinic can also go for NABH accreditation. And for laboratories, already ISO 15189 standard is there, NABL standard is already there for long, long time. So these all are the accreditations available for healthcare facilities in India. So the objective of accreditation is to provide quality of care to the patient and to address the safety of the patient inside the healthcare facility. Now, quality has a different meaning and different definition. And from healthcare point of view, these all are some of the definition I would like to focus on. So the great Aristotle, quality is not an act, it's a habit. But how to implement this quality system in a hospital and how people at different walks of life inside the healthcare facility understand the quality. From the professional point of view, that is from the doctor's point of view, quality means delivering the most advanced knowledge, medical scientific skill to help or save the patient. But from patient point of view, quality means being treated with empathy, respect, and concern. He's not aware whether you are having a 3 Tesla MRI machine, whether you have a cyber knife, or whether you have a robotic surgery facility. Patient is not aware of it or not concerned about it. Patient feels if he is treated with empathy, respect, and concern, then that particular organization providing quality of care. And there is another dimension to the quality is from the medical audit point of view. So the medical audit, what it does is that it analyzes each and every individual against the set standard and sees that whether the outcome has been met as per the standard protocol or not. So from medical audit point of view, quality means having the best achievable outcome for each patient. Accreditation basically focuses on the competency level at various process and system. Whereas in certification, they look at competence level, but they more focus on the conformity to the standard requirement. So when this NABH accreditation was standard was released in 2005, so many hospitals were finding it difficult to follow the standard because at that time the standard has around 100 objective element. There were 100 standards and around 505 objective elements were there to be met. Then standard again after every second or third year, the new edition came. They added few more standards and objective. The NABH 4th edition, which is currently followed, is having 102 standards and 683 objectives to be met. So many of the hospitals which has been there for long, long time, and many hospitals in the small areas, they were finding it difficult to meet those 683 objectives. So looking at the difficulty, NABH has came with one solution. Then what they did is that they introduced a standard called NABH Entry Accreditation Standard. It is not an accreditation, basically it is a certification program. And this was released in the year 2014. and this was found little bit achievable by most of the hospitals. So if you look at the accreditation so far achieved by the hospitals in our country. So as we discussed NABH main standard, then there is one more thing called NABH SHCO, Small Healthcare Organization. So NABH has classified hospital into 50 plus and above category and less than 50 bedded category. So 50 and above category, there are 662 accredited hospitals available as of now in India, and around 825 hospitals have applied for the same. And less than 50 bedded hospitals, there are 291 hospitals who have already got accredited, and there are 435 hospitals who have applied for that. And looking back to this entry-level accreditation, where you have to just meet 167 objectives and you have to follow 45 standards. So there around 1,164 hospitals have achieved that accreditation, above 50 bedded hospital, and 714 have applied. And less than 50 bedded hospital, around 2,771 have already got accreditation, and around 2,295 have applied for the same. So this is the overall accreditation scenario in India. So the intent of NABH was a continuous improvement in patient care process and outcome. This is the basic intention of NABH. Then establish a good clinical practice guideline so that patient get benefit out of this process. There should be a scientific infrastructure and process flow so that the best care is possible in the system. Then patient safety to be addressed at each and every level. This was the intent of the NABH. And respect the patient rights. So basically this was something new to our Indian healthcare scenario. You might be aware, if you go to any government hospital, you are not allowed to talk to the doctor because the doctor is already strained with long queues, loads and loads of patients. He doesn't have time to talk to you. So basically, many of your rights may not be addressed in the current scenario. So NABH wants to address your patient rights, which we are going to see in the coming slides. NABH standard have adopted various ISO standard into their accreditation program. Say ISO 9001 2015 standard, ISO 14000, ISO 10500, and many BIS standard for construction of building, and then National Building Code, then ISO 27000, ISO 15189, ISO 31000 for risk management, then OSHA 18001, which is now again has become ISO 45001, ISO 22000 standard. These all are some of the standards which have been adopted by NABH. So it may not be evident by looking at the standard, but many of the points has been incorporated from this standard in the NABH accreditation. So if you look at the standard, it has got 10 chapters. All the 10 chapters covers all areas of operations of the hospital, starting from the gate of the hospital till the backyard, starting from the basement of the hospital till the rooftop. So this all the 10 chapters covers all aspects of hospital operation. Only two areas the accreditation does not cover. One is your finance, your accounts and finance are not covered under accreditation. Another is your marketing or your branding is not covered under accreditation. But rest of the operations are covered under accreditation. So if you look at the 10 chapters, first 5 chapters which are patient-centered. And the last 5 chapters, they are organization-centered standards. So the first chapter is access, assessment and continuity of care. So this particular chapter talks about your front office, OP, reception, then your it talks about your laboratory services, it talks about your registration and admission process, then it talks about your radiology services. Then this care of patient, it talks about your ward inpatient care, talks about ICU care, it talks about surgical management. Then management of medication talks about your pharmacy services and your usage of medication inside the OP, IP ward emergency. Then patient right talks about what the patient have rights in your healthcare facility. Then the fifth chapter talks about the hospital infection control. As you might be aware, COVID has created a lot of havoc across the globe. So if you follow the infection control guidelines, definitely you can contain any infection. Then in organization-centered standards, there is patient safety and quality. So this is nothing but metrics in ISO standard where you have to measure and monitor all the progresses made in your healthcare delivery. Then responsibility of management, facility management and safety talks about the infrastructure. Then human resource management, it's like any HR protocol. Then information management system, which talks about not only the IT part of your management, but it talks about how to maintain records, registers, how to have a standard operating procedures, and how to maintain the documentation inside the hospital. So some of the key requirements, if you look at it in the front office, reception and OPD, NABH insists on the services which a hospital can provide has to be defined, has to be displayed in a prominent area, visible to all the patient. Display should be in the permanent board, and not only that, the display should be in bilingual language. It should be in local language as well as in English. And the particular services should be focused, particularly the obstetric service and pediatric services. Normally what happens in most of the hospitals, if you go to a smaller hospital, they would have mentioned that obstetric services are available. If you go and check, they will say no, the gynecologist visits only twice a week or twice a week. So basically, to clear off such ambiguity, so NABH wants that you clearly define whether obstetric services are available or not. If available, so on which are the days or date it is available. Say some obstetrician visit only Monday to Wednesday. So you have to clearly mention from Monday to Wednesday obstetric services are available. Similarly, for pediatric services, you have to mention clearly. So this is one of the display. Then one more thing NABH focuses is on the services not offered also needs to be displayed in the hospital clearly. Say for example, you have a OPD service, you have a emergency service, you have a operation theater, but say suppose you don't have a say cancer therapy, so you can tell that cancer therapy are not done in this hospital. Suppose you don't have a cardiology facility, so you can mention that though we have an emergency, but we don't have a cardiothoracic surgery facility, we don't have a cardiology department in our hospital. So services which are not available also need to be clearly displayed. Then there should be a standard operating procedure for registering and admitting patient. And we should transfer the patient when we don't have resource to treat such patient. So normally what happens, sometimes we give first aid to the patient, and when we start treating, we start diagnosing the patient. We find that the diagnosis, we don't have a particular treatment for that particular diagnosis. So we have to immediately transfer the patient to the hospital where the services are available. So suppose we have done a test and we found that the patient is COVID-19 positive. So what we have to do is that we have to refer them to the appropriate center for further treatment and management. And we have to regularly take feedback from the outpatient to understand whether the patients are satisfied with our services or not. So we have to constantly take feedback from the patient. Then we have to display about the patient rights and responsibility for the benefit of the patient. And we have to have one complaint come suggestion box so that in case a patient or the relatives or the attendant, they want to make any complaint or suggestion, they can use that facility. And there should be display about floor wise plan. Basically it should indicate where the particular departments are located, so it is more of a location plan. And not only that, we have to even display about the emergency exit in the reception and OPD areas. And some of the patient rights enumerated in NABHR, patient have right to any special preferences, spiritual and cultural needs to be addressed by the hospital. So basically, what are the special preferences? Say, for example, a patient says, I need an individual room. I don't want a sharing bed. That is his special preferences. If it is available, the hospital is bound to respect that. And what about the spiritual and cultural needs? Say, some may like only a vegetarian diet. So hospital has to provide vegetarian diet. Okay, so that is his cultural needs. And spiritual needs is that sometimes the patient says that I don't want to undergo surgery on Saturday. Saturday is not a lucky day for me, or for some cultural belief, they say Tuesday is not good for me. That is their spiritual belief. If it is elective cases, we can accommodate. If it is an emergency, then there is no choice. But as far as possible, wherever possible, we can accommodate their preferences, spiritual and cultural needs. Then patient have right to personal dignity, privacy during treatment. So basically, the dignity of patient should be addressed at each and every area of the hospital. So you have to address the patient with respect, and you have to maintain the privacy of the patient. So whenever there is examination, you should examine the patient in a covered area by putting necessary screens and enclosures. Then patient have right to be protected from any kind of neglect or abuse. So these kind of neglect and abuse are commonly seen in government hospital. Suppose if you would have experienced this also. If you go to a trauma center in a government hospital, if you don't pay 50 rupees to the wheelchair attender, he will not take you to the casualty. He may push you through the wheelchair to some distance. After that, he may abandon you and go and have his tea. So this one kind of neglect. Another thing is that many of the hospital staff, they abuse the patient. So this is one of the things which NABH focuses, that patient have right to get protection from any kind of neglect or abuse inside the healthcare setup. Then right to privacy and confidentiality. So basically, patient information are very confidential. It should not be shared with anybody. Normally, what happens whenever a patient becomes sick, the whole villages or the whole locality people, they come along with the patient, and everybody inquires about what is his diagnosis, what is his treatment. So basically, it is the confidentiality of the patient information which has to be protected. And patient have right to refuse treatment at any point of time. This is one of the rights of the patient. Say I got a heart attack, I may need an immediate cardiothoracic surgery. I have a right to refuse that cardiothoracic surgery. I may give it in writing that I'm not willing to undergo surgery. It's a part of my fundamental right. Then right to seek additional opinion. I have a right to seek additional opinion about my diagnosis, about my treatment or my plan. So it is one of the right of the patient. But unfortunately, many of the patients, they seek a third opinion, fourth opinion. So a lot of opinion they take, and unfortunately, what happened? They end up with too many opinions. So, so too many opinions again confuse lot of patient. So they are misled most of the time. But always have two opinions. Then right to consent before surgery, anesthesia, blood transfusion, or any high risk treatment. So this is one of the rights of the patient. So before any procedure or surgery or before blood transfusion, we have to give a written consent. So the consent will explain what surgery you have to undergo, what are the alternatives, what are the benefits, what are the risks involved in the surgery. Okay. So with the detailed information, you have to give a written consent. Similarly, for any anesthesia or blood transfusion also, you have to give a written consent. As a patient, you have a right to complain. So whenever you feel that you have not given a proper treatment in the hospital or you have not been taken care of, you have right to complain. As a patient, you have a right to know the expected cost of treatment. Because this one area where you should be very clear. If you are going to a government hospital, most of the treatment are free except for you have to buy few consumables. But if you go to a private hospitals, everything is on a chargeable basis. So you should understand that what is your limitation and whether you have to proceed or not. Say, suppose if I got a heart attack, if I have to go CABG, the CABG may cost somewhere between 2 lakh to 3.5 lakhs. So I have to understand that what is the charges in this particular hospital. If suppose the hospital says that we charge 5 lakhs for CABG, whether I have the resource to undergo this treatment or not, I have to look into that. So first I should understand that what is the expected cost of treatment to proceed further. Then right to access clinical records. I have a right to know about my disease condition, my diagnosis, my treatment, my prognosis. Right to information on the care plan and the progress made so far if I got admitted in the hospital. Then one more thing requirement in the OPD is that about the assessment of the patient. Here what we have to do is that we have to assess the patient in detail and we have to regularly reassess the patient to understand the progress of disease. We have to protect the patient right during the care and we have to involve the patient in decision making. We have to discuss what is the diagnosis, what will be the prognosis, and what are the do's and don'ts we have to do, and how we have to proceed with the treatment. If it is a surgical care, how we have to go. If it is a medical care, how we have to proceed. And one of the requirement in pediatric OPD is that you have to make provision for a feeding room. Because in pediatric patient, lot of lactating mother will be coming with babies, so we should have a dedicated feeding room area in the OPD. And there should be a small play area so that kids can play. So this is one of the requirement for a pediatric OPD or a hospital having pediatric facility. Then low level toilet and hand wash facility for pediatric patient. Then for every pediatric patient, there should be a detailed nutritional assessment, growth assessment, and immunization assessment, whether the babies has been properly immunized or not. The intention of NABH here is to reduce the mortality rate. So child mortality rate is very high in our country. To reduce that, this is the area where NABH want to stress. Then children's family members are educated about nutrition and immunization, and we have to regularly reassess the pediatric patient. and we have to take consent for any treatment procedure or admission. And one more emphasis NABH wants to give about the rational prescription of medication as per the good practice guideline given by WHO. World Health Organization has given the prescription guideline, so that we have to follow. And the minimum requirement of prescription should have the drug name, dosage, route, frequency at which we have to take the drug, name of the patient, date and time at which this particular prescription was given, and the registration number of the doctor. These all are the minimum requirement of prescription which we have to follow. Then we have to maintain the OPD records of the patient. So in case the patient comes for follow-up, we have a proper record so we can track the patient progress. And in casualty or in emergency, we have to follow the uniform care of patient. So here uniform care of patient means you have to treat each and every patient irrespective of whether they have the capability to pay or not. We have to give minimum first aid. This is one of the requirement. Even Supreme Court has given a recent judgment that hospital cannot deny first aid. So basic first aid has to be given, and hospital cannot deny that I am a cardiothoracic center, I cannot handle trauma, or I am a, say, ENT hospital, I will not give first aid to a road traffic accident. Supreme Court has given a clear guidelines that you give minimum first aid and then refer the patient to a appropriate center. So wherever applicable, hospital has to follow laws and regulation. So basically, wherever there is a medical legal cases, you have to intimate to the police. You have to register in the MLC register, and you have to follow the Clinical Establishment Act. If you have ultrasound, then you have to register under Preconception Prenatal Diagnostic Technique Act. Then HOTA Act, Hospital Organ Transplant Act, Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. These all are some of the acts and legislation which we have to follow during the treatment. Then consent has to be taken before undergoing any procedure, and police intimation is must for all medical legal cases. Then we should have a standard operating procedure to provide general emergency or management of specific emergency like poisoning or handling cardiac cases. Then the procedure also incorporate at a minimum identification, assessment, and provision of care. So we should have a protocol how we will identify the patient. Many times what happens in casualty or emergency, and passerby, they take the patient, unconscious patient, they take them to nearby hospital. So how we will identify such patient? So there should be minimum 2 identification. So if we could not get any identification from the patient, we can just write that he has got a mole in his right hand or left hand, or from his description we can make identification, and then we have to assess him and then provide the care. And we have to define what constitute an medical legal cases. This is another gray area where there is a lot of confusion. So basically, we have to define what constitute medical legal cases. There are certain government, they have given certain guidelines like all accident cases are to be treated as medical legal. Any assault, murder, or suicide has to be treated as medical legal cases. Poisoning, drowning to be treated as medical legal cases. Or even a snake bite and scorpion bite are considered to be medical legal cases. Fall from a height, that also to be treated as medical legal cases. Any industrial accident also needs to be treated as medical legal cases. So these are some of the guidelines issued by various government. So any medical legal cases, we have to register in appropriate record and we have to intimate to the police. Then another area where NABH focuses on triage of patient for initiation of appropriate care. So when more than 2 or 3 patients come to the casualty at a time, so there what we have to do, we have to classify the patient and we have to treat based on the emergency of the patient. Say there are a mass road traffic accident. Suppose there is a bus accident where 20 patients have come to the casualty and died. Now all the 20 may not require the same type of care. Some may be battling their life, who may require immediate care. Some where there may be a grievous injury, may be suffering from pain, but they may not require an immediate care. They can wait for some time. There may be some patient with minor injuries who can wait for more than 2 hours also. So based on the condition of the patient, we have to triage, classify the patient and start giving the treatment. Another area where NABH emphasized that all the staff should be trained on basic cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So basically, in a country like India, where we don't train our staff on cardiopulmonary resuscitation, whereas in many advanced countries, this cardiopulmonary resuscitation training are given even in 6th or 7th grade student. They have been trained on how to perform this cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And staff should be, nursing and doctors should be trained in advanced cardiopulmonary resuscitation for both adult, pediatric and neonatal. Then whenever a patient is transferred from the casualty to some hospital for further treatment, there should be a transfer summary should be given. We should mention patient came with what type of condition and what are the treatment required. That needs to be mentioned. And if at all, if the patient is discharged from the casualty, it should be given a discharge summary, mentioning that patient came with so and so complaint and he has been treated, and during the time of discharge, his condition was normal or whatever it may be, we have to mention. Similarly, when there is a discharge or admission, we have to mention in the register that the patient has got admitted from casualty to either ICU or to the ward. Or similarly, if the patient is discharged, we have to mention that patient is discharged to the home, or if he has been referred, we have to mention that he has been referred to the other center. Then there should be a standard operating procedure or protocol for handling patient found dead on arrival. Or sometimes what happens, a patient dies as soon as he arrives in the casualty. So these are all the two scenarios. So we should have a standard operating procedure. So normally, as per the government guidelines, if the patient is not being treated in the hospital, and if you suspect that the diagnosis could not be made, the real cause of death could not be arrived, then you have to refer them to a government hospital for post-mortem. Then after only they will be issuing the death certificate. The hospital is not supposed to issue any death certificate without arriving at any diagnosis. So in case of patient dead on arrival, the ideal thing is that you refer the patient to the government hospital to undergo post-mortem, so that the cause of death can be ascertained and you will get the death certificate from the government hospital. Then we have to maintain a logbook of patient found dead on arrival. So in case the patient is dead on arrival, we have to maintain a logbook. And what do in case of unclaimed or unaccompanied bodies? Sometimes the passerby, he brings the patient. As soon as the patient reaches the casualty, patient dies. Okay. So it's unclaimed body. So we should have a mortuary where we have to keep the unclaimed bodies, and we have to intimate to the police. We have to see if they're nearby or the relatives able to come. If not, then we have to hand it over to the police. If at all ambulance services are available in the hospital ambulance should be well equipped. Unfortunately, many of the ambulances available are not well equipped. They may not have life-saving equipment, and they are more like a transport vehicle. Only difference between the transport vehicle and ambulance is that here you can lie down, whereas in transport vehicle you cannot lie down. That is the only difference. Otherwise, there is no much difference. But NABH focuses on well-equipped ambulance. So, if a hospital has got ambulance, there should be adequate space to park ambulance in front of the hospital. The ambulance should have a RC book, license for the driver, fitness certificate should be there, pollution control board certificate and insurance should be up to date in the ambulance. Ambulance should have at least basic life support equipment like your oxygen, like your defibrillator, then your infusion pump. This should be there. If it's an advanced ambulance, then there should be a ventilator facility also. Ambulance should be manned by a trained driver. So trained driver means not only he knows about driving, he should know about the basic first aid. And depending upon the clinical condition of the patient, the ambulance staff accompanying the patient, whether technician, nurse, or the doctor, they should be trained on the care depending upon the situation. Suppose if we are transferring a cardiac patient, then a particular doctor and nurses should be trained on how to handle the cardiac patient, and they should accompany the patient to transfer the patient to the appropriate cardiac center. Then the ambulance should be checked on a daily basis for lights, siren, whether brakes are working or not, whether fuel is there in the system or not, whether battery level is sufficient or not, whether it is starting smoothly or not, whether there is any noise in the engine or not. That has to be checked on a daily basis. Hospital has to be serviced as per the manufacturer schedule. And emergency medications are to be checked daily. And not only that, during each dispatch, we have to check whether all medicines, emergency medicines are available in the ambulance and they are fit to be used for the patient care. An ambulance should have a dedicated and proper communication system. Many times what we have seen is that the ambulance driver used to have his personal mobile number. He'll be talking to his relatives for a long time and sometimes he may miss the real call, real emergency call. That's why NABH insists that you give a dedicated communication system to the ambulance driver so that he is available round the clock. Then there should be a standard operating procedure or protocol to initiate treatment at the earliest when the patient is in transit. So this is one of the area where NABH want to focus. Then about the pharmacy services, NABH insists on that all pharmacies should have license. There should be a drug formulary or hospital formulary. The medications are stored in a very clean, safe and secure environment so that the rodent or the pest control measures are appropriately taken so that there is no rodent or pest inside the pharmacy. Then separate storage of lookalike and sound-alike drug and high-risk medicine. Then we have to define the reorder level. So reorder level based on the average sales plus the lead time. So basically that the zero inventory management practice which has been taken from various other industry. Okay, so that needs to be followed in the pharmacy. Then certain drugs which needs to be stored between 2 to 8 degree needs to be stored in the fridge or in a deep freezer depending upon the storage condition recommended by the manufacturer. And daily we have to monitor the room and fridge temperature because most of the manufacturers say store in a cool place. But during summer, our temperature goes up to 40-42 degree and our inside room temperature may be around 35 to 38 degree. So cool means it should be less than 30 degree. So we have to monitor room temperature and as well as the fridge temperature to ensure that the medicines stored are appropriately stored. Then we have to follow the first in, first out, and we have to follow fast moving, slow moving, non-moving drugs. And then not only that, we have to do an analysis called vital drug analysis, essential drug analysis, and desirable drug analysis to ensure that there is regular supply of vital drugs in the pharmacy. So beyond expiry, medicines are not to be stored. So there should be a expiry policy. So many hospitals, what they do is that 3 months before expiry itself, they set the deadline for the drug to be removed from the pharmacy. so that by any accident also there is no expired drug stored in the pharmacy. And if a hospital uses any narcotic drug, it should be under double lock and key. There should be narcotic drugs. There should be a proper register and prescription for maintaining the narcotic drugs. For radiology services, there should be appropriate signages. The turnaround time for giving the imaging report should be defined and should be monitored. And whenever there is a critical result, that should be intimated immediately to the treating doctor. And we have to have a protocol for identification and transportation of the patient to the imaging services. And similarly, the imaging personnel are to be trained on safe practices and are provided with appropriate safety equipment and devices. So these all are the some of the equipment and devices like your IVR, thyroid shield, Adapron, and gonad shields. And similarly for lab services, we have to provide a quality lab service because many of the treatment are dependent upon the lab diagnosis. So what we have to do is that we have to provide a protocol for sample collection, identification, handling, safe transportation, processing, and disposal of specimen. What happens many of the times the patient doesn't know the collection protocol. Say if it is a fasting sugar, that means it should have a minimum 10 to 12 hours of fasting. You are allowed to take water but not allowed to take coffee or juices or any other light snacks. So we have to give a written guidelines to the patient before blood sample that fasting means it's minimum 10 to 12 hours. You should not take any of the food items, snacks or coffee or juices. So that those things we have to explain to the patient. Then we have to properly identify the patient. Sometimes mix-up of sample also leads to a lot of error reporting. Then proper handling and transportation of the sample to the lab in an appropriate manner. So basically in a thermocol box with ice pack. Then we have to process the sample and we have to dispose the specimen appropriately. So with this, I stop today's session because it's a big topic and already we are 10 past 50. So I would like to take any questions from your side.